Hi, everybody. I'm just giving a couple of minutes, maybe like 2 or 3, to see if anybody else is going to join us before we get started. So while we are waiting on a couple of other people to join us, I'm just going to get started. And I just want to first say welcome to the 2022 Community Academy. It means a lot to me that all of you are here. My name is Sarah Alanis. I am the Projects, Boards, and Commissions Coordinator for the City of Ann Arbor, which is just a fancy way of saying that I deal with everything boards and commissions. Ann Arbor has around 62 boards and commissions that are active currently, and I help facilitate all of that. Another thing that I do with my job is the Community Academy. So this means a lot to me personally that all of you have decided to come and take this ride with us for this 2022 year. This year is a little bit different as we have opened it up to anybody, and we took out the application process and opened it up to anybody who, whether you live in Ann Arbor, you live around Ann Arbor, just anybody. So this is exciting, and I really appreciate everybody being here. Just kind of a couple of housekeeping things. So we are going to be hearing every Wednesday from a different department within the city. You can ask questions in the Q&A box. That'll be the best way to ask anything at the end when our guest speakers are done with their presentations. They'll be able to look at the Q&A box and then answer some of those questions live. And we're gonna, since we have kind of a big group, that's gonna be the way that we're going to do the question and answers instead of doing the normal raising the hand and talking, just so that way everything keeps on going. So you can ask your question at any time in that question and answer box, and then we'll refer to it at the end. And yeah, like I said, every single Wednesday, we'll be doing this for the next 2 months, and you have to attend at least 7 of the classes in order to graduate. So at the end, we'll be doing a graduation ceremony that some of the city council members are going to be attending as well to say congratulations, and they'll be doing a Q&A as well on that final day. The day that you guys graduate. So yeah, so I think those are all of the housekeeping things. If you guys have any questions, you can also email me directly. I am always available for any of you. But for now, we are going to first hear the very first program is going to be from our city administrator. So Milton, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Sarah. Good evening to all of you. I'm very appreciative that you're willing to spend part of your Wednesdays with us, learning about your government. I was asked if I could be available on your kickoff night to talk to you about the city administrator's office and talk to you a little bit about my background, since I'm relatively new to Ann Arbor. And so I'm happy to spend some time with you. My approach to these kinds of things is, it's better for you if I am as candid as I can possibly be to help you understand my job, kind of how I approach it, understand the functionality of your government. Only having been here 4 months, I started on October 18th. There's still a lot of things I don't yet know about how we do things. There's a lot of people that I haven't met, but I've been very excited to be here. Not really thrilled about the winter. I had thought that when I left Ohio years ago and moved to Arizona that I was through with that, but here we are. And so yesterday, I got my first exposure to how this part of the country treats Fat Tuesday. And I had never heard of putskis or the whatever it is, and seen people standing in line to buy them and all of that. I've been to New Orleans. I was sharing with people, part of my family bloodline includes Creoles, so jelly-filled donut is not something I was familiar with. So, but it was fun, and again, I'm glad to be here. So I've got a presentation that I'm going to use. I'm going to walk through some slides. I'm going to do it in a way that I hope you will find interesting, in explaining about the city administrator's office, about some things that we're trying to do right now. And because I am new to Ann Arbor and new to virtually all of you, I'm going to talk a little bit more about my background at the top of it, just to give you a flavor of the kinds of environments I've been in, kind of where I got my experience, the kind of engagements I've been involved in along the way. And that's relevant in that informs and influences what I bring to the table now at this stage of my career and working with the city of Ann Arbor and trying to help the community to address some of the issues that's in front of it. And then, as Sarah indicated, when I get to the end, I'll be happy to look at the Q&A and then try to respond to whatever questions that you may put in the chat. I don't know how long these sessions are supposed to go, but we're not going to be here all night. So I'll talk for, I don't know, 30, 40 minutes and then do Q&A with you, and then let you go home and get into whatever you want to do for the rest of the evening. So Sarah, if you could bring up my slides. My understanding is you're going to move the slides when I ask you to. And so if we could, yeah, there you go. Thank you very much. So as I indicated right off the top, I've been here since October the 18th, a little over 4 months. I came as the interim city administrator under the current arrangement that I have with city council. My tenure here will be up to 15 months until and unless we decide to make it permanent. So I'm here for 15 months to try to provide additional level of stability to the organization. And I'll talk a little bit more about how I'm trying to go about that as we move forward. Next slide, please. So to begin, I'll kind of touch on the 4 cities that I've been in prior to coming to Ann Arbor. So in the upper left, Louisville. Louisville, Kentucky is my home. It's where I grew up. It's where my grandchildren are. Kentucky's where our 2 grown sons are. Family, whole 9 yards. My career actually began in the private sector. I didn't go to school initially to become a public servant within local government. I started my career working in the private sector for the American Standard Corporation. I worked in a manufacturing facility, and I thought my life would be a corporate life. I went through a recession in the early 80s. American Standard laid off a lot of its executives. I worked in what was called industrial relations at the time. I was doing day-to-day labor relations with the Teamsters Union in a manufacturing facility. And then when I lost my job, I became a full-time faculty member at Eastern Kentucky University, teaching in the College of Business and Economics. And again, my thought process was I was going to, at some point, go back to corporate life. So skipping a lot of twists and turns, I ended up going back to Louisville. And at some point in our lives, we may come to a point where we just need a job for survival. It doesn't really matter what the job is. You've got to make ends meet. You need to be gainfully employed. And I talked to a friend of mine who was the HR director at the city of Louisville. And she told me about a middle management job with the city. And my first response to her was, I don't know anything about government. I didn't study it in school. I don't understand politics. And she told me that I was qualified for it. And so I went to work for the city, spent 20 plus years working for the city of Louisville. And so if you were to go to Louisville today, some of the things that I was a part of making happen back starting in the mid 80s, but really when I got to the top of the organization, I became the deputy mayor of Louisville in 1999. I also served a tenure as the public safety director. I worked on the merger of Louisville and Jefferson County governments. That was one thing that happened during my tenure there. I also was part of the team that created 4th Street Live. And so if you go to the downtown entertainment district, I was part of helping to make that happen. I was director of the public safety effort when 9/11 happened. And so the first international event on American soil post 9/11 was the Kentucky Derby. And so we didn't, really know what we were doing per se. That was a culture change for all of us, having to deal with an event that drew over 150,000 people from around the world to a place that heretofore had been wide open. And we had to then build an infrastructure around security that exists to this day. And a couple of other notable things that occurred during my tenure as the deputy mayor. We took down the last 2 stereotypical public housing developments and recreated them into mixed-use neighborhoods. I'm very proud of that because the area of the city where that occurred is the part of town that I grew up in. So being able to help make that happen was positive for me. I moved on to Lexington, Kentucky after that as the chief administrative officer. So in Louisville, we had 4,200 employees. When I went to Lexington, the government was already merged. And so it was an urban county government. And there I gained additional experience dealing with both urban and rural issues. And when you say rural in Lexington, you do not mean rustic. Lexington is home to the thoroughbred racing industry. And so the multi-million-dollar horse farms ring the urban core, and places where Secretariat used to be and horses that you see running in the Derby, when they finish their careers, that's where they are. And so there I learned how to balance urban and rural issues. Because in the thoroughbred industry, you can't have lights and noise and things that you find in an urban setting that might interrupt the horses that stand at stud. Very eye-opening for me. One of the signature things I gained experience doing in Lexington was not only did we again take down a stereotypical public housing development and recreate it into a mixed income neighborhood, I was able to play a key role in persuading the school system to put a community school in that area, which had never been done before and still exists to this day. And I was very proud of the role I played with that. In Lexington, I had about 3,200 employees. And then I went to Cincinnati for 8 years as city manager. There was 6,000 employees. And the, I guess, signature things of my tenure while I was there, when I went there in 2006, there was 18 acres of dirt at the waterfront between the two stadiums where the Bengals, who just went to the Super Bowl, and the Cincinnati Reds play ball. The city had been trying for about 15 years to develop its waterfront. It had never been able to get that off the ground. So one of the things I worked on and played a pivotal role in was the waterfront development. So if you go to Cincinnati today, what you will see is an area called the Banks. And it's at the water's edge. There's several hundred apartments, there's restaurants, there's a hotel, there's a corporate tower. And many of those things we broke ground on and got built while I was still there. And the Cincinnati streetcar system was something that we also did from scratch. The exposure I got working in Cincinnati includes the fact that, and many people don't necessarily know this, but the headquarters of Macy's, of Kroger's, and Procter & Gamble is all in downtown Cincinnati. And so when you have the weight of those kinds of headquarter institutions in your city, it allows you to do things and have a latitude and a breadth that you wouldn't otherwise be a part of. The other thing that I think is key to my background that I did while in Cincinnati was negotiate a consent decree with the Department of Justice to bring police reform to Cincinnati, Ohio. There was a civil unrest in Cincinnati in 2001, and there was a lot of things that spiraled from that. And when I got there in 2006, we were going to federal court. I think I spent about 2 years going to federal court trying to hammer out an agreement between the city and the feds and the community. And we made a lot of changes to policing in Cincinnati as a result of that. I left there in 2013 and then went to Phoenix, not as the city manager, but as the #2 guy. Phoenix is the 5th largest city in the United States. The city population in Phoenix is 1.7 million people. And so I went from an environment where we had 6,000 employees to nearly 15,000 employees. And there I got exposure and got to work on all the things you would assume you'd find in a very large city. So I coordinated the Super Bowl in 2015, the Final Four. I did the first college national championship game between Alabama and Clemson. And I'm also the architect of the civilian oversight entity in Phoenix called the Office of Accountability and Transparency, or OAT, as we call it. And, one of the things that added to my experience and background in Phoenix is its proximity to the border. So there's a lot of border politics that play out in Arizona. As quiet as it's kept, when you think about some of the most horrific acts that have happened in American history as it relates to terrorism, Oklahoma City, 9/11, the terroristic act that took place in Texas a handful of years ago. All of those people, Timothy McVeigh, some of the people involved in 9/11, all lived in Phoenix at one point in time. Because of the desert, because it's 500 plus square miles, people were able to sort of practice their evil under the cloak of the desert and then go off and do other things. The last thing, and I said this at the outset about things that you do in your career and that really have an impact on you. In March of 2020, the mayor and the city manager asked me to take charge of the city's COVID response. We didn't even know what COVID was when we started. And that will stay with me the rest of my life, because during the time that I was doing that, we had over 2,000 employees test positive, and we had double-digit deaths while I was working there. And so doing COVID 24/7 and doing a lot of things that local government had never done before, we also had 100 consecutive nights of protest in the streets following the murder of George Floyd. And so after doing that for more than a year, I concluded that I just needed to step away. It was not sustainable for me to keep doing that for the rest of my career. So I retired from Phoenix in February, knowing that I would rekindle my career at some point, but I needed a break. I sat for a few months and then I tried to re-engage. And that's when I was contacted about coming to Ann Arbor, and came to Ann Arbor in October. Much different place from the 4 other places I've been, but I do feel blessed to be here. Next slide, please. So in terms of local government, cities will either have a charter or a constitution that outlines the type of government it has and the way that the government is going to function. In Ann Arbor, we have a charter, and the charter essentially lays out the authority and responsibilities of the major players in government, and lays out the responsibilities for elected officials. It lays out the responsibility of the city administrator, and it's pretty specific about who is supposed to do what. And because it results from a vote of the people, then it can only be changed by a vote of the people. And occasionally there'll be a ballot initiative to tweak certain things, but for the most part, the core remains intact. Next slide, please. So when you think about forms of government, there's different ones, but the 2 that you hear about most is strong mayor, which is what we had in Louisville, or council manager, which is what we have here. And the council well, let me back up. In both forms of government, whether it's strong mayor or council manager, the face of the city is still the mayor. That does not change. So the mayor's the face of Ann Arbor, and the mayor was the face of all the other places that I've worked as well. The council manager form of government that we have here can be found in 800 countries. Over 60% of the population of the United States that has 100,000 or more people, they have council manager form of government. You will find it in Canada, you'll find it in Australia, New Zealand, and the United Kingdom. All of those utilize the council manager form of government as we have here. Next slide, please. So in terms of the difference as it relates to the role that I play, if we were in a strong mayor form of government, then my role would be as the chief administrative officer. That means that the mayor is the chief executive. As the appointed professional person, I would be the CAO, as we call it. And so the difference is in the council manager form of government, which is what we have, I wear two hats. The city administrator or city manager is both the chief executive and the chief administrative officer. And so under our charter, the city council essentially have two employees. One is the city attorney, and the other is the city administrator. This is the first city that I've worked in where the city attorney did not report directly to me. In the other cities I've worked in, I appointed the city attorney. In Cincinnati, as an example, it's called the city solicitor. But those were all people that were part of the staff administration. So here, Stephen Postema, who is our outgoing city attorney, he is considered my peer. And so the lawyers all work for him. And so he and I have to coexist as peers, which has worked out well. It's a little tricky at times because I don't have the authority to direct any of their activity, but we collaborate and must collaborate a lot on the city's business, on whether it's litigation or whatever. And I should have mentioned this when I started. I didn't, so please forgive me. So I'm still at City Hall, and at City Hall at 7 p.m., the lights automatically go out. So I'm now in darkness. So I'm going to ask you to give me 2 or 3 minutes because I've got to go around 2 hallways and turn the lights back on so I can see what I'm doing. So I'll be right back. Hold on.
Just a quick reminder for everybody, since we're at like a pause point, these sessions are all recorded and they will be available later on in the week on the A2Gov A2CA page under the 2022 resources tab. I will link the videos there. So just wanted to let you know.
Sorry about that. So in finishing out my thought here, under our form of government, all of the employees other than the city attorney are considered to work for the city administrator. So I hire all the department heads, I appoint the chiefs, I handle all of the administrative matters of running the government day to day, and I report to 11 bosses, the mayor and the 10 city council people. And so based on our charter and the way that we're set up, there are restrictions on elected officials interacting with staff without going through the city administrator. Sometimes that's a bit awkward because it's not a huge organization, but there's still several hundred people that work here. And to be an effective council person, you need information. You want information. You want to have influence over what your city is doing. You're a member of the board of directors, if you will. And so part of what we have to constantly work on to make sure that we're being efficient is to ensure that the conduit from the elected officials to the staff includes the city administrator's office. And the reason that that's important is that if an elected official goes directly to a staff person that's 3 or 4 levels below the city administrator and no one knows that that's occurred, you really can't hold the administrator accountable because he or she's not even been involved. And you can't ensure that what you're looking for as an elected official will happen because a person that you're going to may or may not realize even how to prioritize what your request is. And so in our government, we push and we have processes, methods and procedures for how elected officials seek information from staff, how they engage with us on policy directions that they want to see, how they engage with us on addressing issues that are of concern to them. Next slide, please. So the city of Ann Arbor, plus or minus, we have 800 employees in round numbers. We have 7 labor unions, and so we do collective bargaining or contract negotiation with each of them. Overall, I would say that the labor climate here is fairly positive. We don't have a lot of labor issues or a lot of animosity between management and labor. I think one of the most challenging things that we've had to deal with as regards to labor management relations has been when the city went through the vaccine mandate. That caused a lot of consternation within the organization. And we had to work through a number of issues that actually started before I got here, but was still underway when I came in October. If you put all of our different types of budgets together in round numbers, it's about $600 million. We do a 2-year budget, so biannual budget. So we pass a budget first year, and the second year is really a continuation of the same. We do make some adjustments. We're dealing with the second year of our biennial budget right now. So I will be making my budget presentation to City Council on the evening of April the 18th. And there will be about a month after that during that month, there'll be deliberations with council members. I'm sure the public will be essentially advocating or trying to lobby council members to change the budget that I gave them. That is a normal part of our democracy. The city administrator, by charter, must convey a budget to the city council, and the city council must pass some version of a budget. The budget passage for this year will occur on the evening of May the 16th. So it's roughly about a month from the time I officially give it to them. We have, as you know, a mayor and 10 council members. We have 5 wards in the city and 2 council members per each of the 5 wards. In some cities, council members or some portion of the council is elected at large. In our city, that's not the case. Everybody comes from a ward and the mayor is elected citywide. According to our charter, the mayor does have a vote on city council. So not only is he the presiding officer at council meetings, he can vote on what the deliberations are. And he also has the authority under the charter to issue a veto. That does not occur very often in Ann Arbor. But if the mayor should choose to veto an ordinance or a resolution or something that city council has passed, it takes 8 votes to overturn his veto. And again, that's something that doesn't happen very often. The reason I put COVID-19 impacted at the bottom of this slide is because since COVID, the way that this government functions has changed dramatically. For the most part, the majority of the administrative staff that can have been working remotely for more than a year, and that's still the case. So if you come in City Hall on most days, a lot of the offices are empty. People are working from home. The positions, you know, there's some positions where that's not feasible. But because of COVID, it's caused us to develop a level of flexibility that we didn't have before. It's caused the physical design of our workspaces to change. It's forced us to get into things like mask or no mask, vaccine or no vaccine, things that have been really politicized across the country. And it has made it challenging at times to manage the day-to-day when we're trying to deal with all of those things. Before COVID, we really didn't have any wide-scale teleworking, but we do now. And so another impact of COVID is we had to invest technology-wise in a number of laptops so people could work from home. And so figuring out how to make that feasible and the logistics work. Before COVID, we weren't really using Zoom and Teams and all of that. So we had to learn how to do that, and we're still doing it. And then as an employer, we had to develop policies and procedures sort of on the fly to adapt to things that really had never been contemplated. So I'll give you a practical example. We have employees that live all over the area. Some live in Ann Arbor, but some live in Ypsilanti and other surrounding communities. All of those communities have separate school systems, and schools are making policies about remote learning for kids versus in-person learning. And so we had to work with our workforce on you know, we want them to work remotely, but they're telling us, well, I'm trying to do that, but I also got to help my kids with their schoolwork because there's nobody else to do it. And how can we work through that? So all of those things are things we had to develop an ability to do. One of the other aspects of managing the local government that we were already doing it, but have had to do it more since COVID. So you hear on news shows, you see in movies, this notion about cyber attacks and cyber crime. Well, we've had to pay a lot more attention to that since COVID, because you have people working on computers in their homes and accessing information into governmental systems. Well, there's also bad actors trying to infiltrate governmental systems as well. So when you see across the country, governments having their technology hijacked and held ransom and all that stuff's real. And we now have to spend time on it every single day trying to protect our systems here. Next slide, please. The city administrator's office, it's bigger than you might think by just looking at that. So it's not just about myself, our assistant city administrator, our administrative support. The city administrator's office in Ann Arbor also includes the other elements you see on the slide. The city clerk's office that runs our elections, our communications office, community services, which includes community and economic development, our finance office, our fleet and facilities, HR, information technology that I talked about. So I'll swing back and touch on just a couple of things that these offices are being asked to do. One of the things that local government, regardless of what city you're talking about, has had to play catch up with relates to social media. Local governments were never, we were never the first to embrace social media. We didn't immediately start tweeting when it was created. We weren't immediately on Instagram, but now we have to do all of those things. And so we've had to expand our ability to engage with the public, to communicate with the public where they are instead of where they have been traditionally. Within our fleet and facilities area, we're dealing with things like electrifying our fleet. Because Ann Arbor is really embraced sustainability and we own hundreds of vehicles, so we're trying to periodically get rid of vehicles where we use gas for vehicles that we can plug in and run off electricity. In the IT area, I talked about that. One of the new things that we are pursuing, organizational equity. The city council, before I got here, made a decision that it wanted to have a professional to address diversity, equity, and inclusion. When I got here and looked at that, it was set to be a manager level position. I have changed that and made it a director level position. That position will report to me directly, and it will be our director of organizational equity. We're working right now to have a search firm go out and find who that is. And that person will help us to get better as an organization to really institutionalize things that we say we value. And so I'm looking forward to making that hire and getting on with that work. Police and fire, obvious what they do. Our safety office has helped us with COVID. And then our sustainability and innovations office, or OSI as we call it, that's the people that are driving our sustainability platform. Next slide, please. We have a number of strategic relationships. The University of Michigan is one. This is a city where it's a traditional college town, if you will, where the university is a predominant presence. So we have a lot of lines of communication going with them at all times on a wide variety of issues. We work with the Ann Arbor Housing Commission. This city does not do its own housing. We don't really do our own economic development. So we use the Housing Commission to work on affordable housing. The AAA TA, our transit authority, we interact with them regarding mobility related issues. Because we don't have an internal economic development office or department, we have a relationship with Spark, and they do a number of the economic development initiatives, working with startups, working with trying to help recruit businesses to Ann Arbor. And so I have a seat on their board and communicate regularly with them. I certainly do not have a seat on the University of Michigan on the Board of Regents, but I do communicate with university officials all the way up to the president of the university. We have a relationship with the public school system. In some cities, the city runs the school system. As you know, we don't do that here. So we have to have collaboration with schools to the extent possible. That's a relationship that, in my view, we need to get a little better at. Washtenaw County. And then when I came and looked at how we do business, how we operate, one of the things I noticed is that Ann Arbor does not have federal lobbyists. And from my experiences in other cities, I know that if you want to have a chance at influence on Capitol Hill and to strengthen your hand to get federal dollars brought back to your city, even if you've got a great rapport with your congressional delegation, as we do with Congresswoman Dingell, Senator Stabenow, and others, we needed a lobbyist. So we're going through a process right now to do a contract, and we've done an RFP process. We're in the process of trying to negotiate a contract with a federal lobbyist so that we can have a stronger presence in DC. Part of the reason that that's important is if we want to get our share of the federal infrastructure dollars, we need someone on the ground in DC who can advise us on where the various pots are, on what we need to go through in order to bring some of that money home. And so I'm looking forward to cultivating a relationship with the lobbyists so we can get on with that. The red-blue dynamic, you all have lived here longer than me. I'm sure you can appreciate it. But the bottom line is simply this: because Ann Arbor is a solidly blue city, we do not have the political leverage to go to Lansing and just show up and say, we're from Ann Arbor and we need you to help us do A, B, and C, because we don't have the political leverage to make that happen. So we have to work harder at it. We do have state lobbyists that we use, but we have to work in concert with other municipalities across Michigan who want the same things that we want or have the same interests that we have in order to help get things done on behalf of our city. So as the city administrator, I'm starting to build some relationships in Lansing. That'll be a work in progress. And hopefully, I can help as we move forward with making things a little better for our community. Next slide, please. So I want to spend a few minutes just touching on some internal and external issues I could spend the entire time talking about a whole laundry list of things that's in front of us, but I just want to give you a flavor for some of the things that we are trying to address both internally and externally. We're getting closer to the Q&A part, and looks like we've got double-digit questions in queue, so I'll be getting to them in just a few minutes. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So internal issues. First on the list is organizational stability. So without going into a lot of detail, I don't really need to. You lived here. I'm sure you're aware of it. But when you have any kind of an organization, and particularly one in the public realm, where we are here to be servant leaders, we're here to serve the public. And when you have an organization that's gone through, we're now on the third city administrator in the last 2 years. We're about to go to our third HR director in the past 2 years. When you're having change at the top that rapidly, it destabilizes the organization. People become uncertain about, where are we going? What do we stand for? What's the big picture? What's going on? And because we've had 2 city administrators that were both terminated, for people below that, it sends shock waves through the organization. And so we're trying to recover from that. So me being here for a long stretch of time is both therapeutic for the organization, but I think also will help us in terms of being focused on things that we need to get done. We are a lean organization, 800 plus or minus employees. To do the things that we're being asked to do is why we need to have strategic relationships, why we need to collaborate with other institutions in order to get things accomplished. We may not have the ability to do them all on our own. So we have to either farm out certain things or work with others. We're going to be a lean organization for the long foreseeable future. We don't have the financial capacity to just go hire 100 people. So it kind of is what it is. Staffing is something that we're spending a lot of time on right now. So not only are we trying to hire an HR director, a director of organizational equity, our service area administrator over public services just retired. And so we're trying to fill that position. We have a number of other people that are retirement eligible and are leaving. We have people in our sworn professions, police and fire, that are retiring. And we're at a time where a number of people in the country have decided post-COVID, hey, I'm going to quit my job, or I'm going to change careers, or whatever. So we're trying to deal with those things. Competitive market is another internal issue. One of the things I discovered upon coming here is, even though we had a city policy requiring our contractors to pay a livable wage, we weren't doing it. And that didn't seem to be the best thing for us to do. So we have fixed that. And so we had some jobs that were paying as low as $9.87. We've changed that to $15.66, and it'll go up on April the 1st again. And in the budget that I'll be presenting to council in April, I'm asking them to continue to allow us to pay a competitive or livable wage, which is good for the government, good for the community, and allows us to be consistent with the policy that we've set. Another internal issue is our tax structure. We rely heavily on property tax. Many cities have the legal authority to have a local sales tax. We don't. Other cities have taxes on jobs that are created. We don't. And so we rely on the millage to generate the revenue and our portion of state revenue sharing. That's really how this organization works. Next slide, please. External issues that we're dealing with. The list is familiar to you, I'm sure. Homelessness, affordable housing. We're trying to recast what public safety means in Ann Arbor. I think it's likely council will vote to support some version of unarmed response in the proposed list of ARPA spending that I gave City Council last Friday. Put $3.5 million in for that. University relations, sustainability, infrastructure. We are developing an infrastructure agenda. And why that is important, we need to make sure that we are coordinated and in sync with each other when we identify what are all the possible projects that we could be doing that would be eligible for the president's infrastructure bill. And so we're organizing right now. We're going to make that agenda public. We're going to share it with lobbyists. We're going to share it with people in DC and in Lansing so that we're clearly transparent about what dollars we're chasing and what good or what impact it would make in our city. And then economic growth. And this is a little peculiar for me, but I'm trying to assimilate into the community. So I'll give you the situation that we're in. So our city is just under 30 square miles. We're not completely built out. The city government does not own the real estate holdings that a lot of other cities do. We don't have a lot of land that we own that's available. So if we say that we want to have more affordable housing, if we say that for some segment of our population, Ann Arbor is not really affordable, then that says to me, we have to be focused on economic growth. We have to make policies around density because we're landlocked. We're not going to be able to annex the rest, a lot of land. We have to build more vertically in order to create opportunities for housing, for small businesses. And one of the challenges that we're working through is some people in Ann Arbor like growth and some see it as a bad thing. And as your city administrator, what I'm trying to point out is if we don't have economic growth, especially since we don't have a local sales tax, we're not going to have the money to do the things that the public says they want to see us do. The bullet point right under that, all level jobs, and this has not been a topic of conversation in Ann Arbor much, but to me it's relevant. If you say that to a degree Ann Arbor is not affordable and we have a segment of the population that needs housing and other things, to me that means we can't put all of our focus on the development or the recruiting of high wage jobs that requires high levels of formal education because some of our people won't be eligible for those positions. It means that we need jobs at all levels in order for all of our residents to have the opportunity to be gainfully employed so that they can help take care of themselves. And then lastly is the notion of equity. We have got a lot of work to do on equity, both internally and externally. And that's something that we'll be working on going forward. The last thing I'll mention on this slide, which this will make sense to you, it's a little, it causes tension at times, but because of the presence of the University of Michigan, and because of what I just told you about, we have limited land and we derive our revenue from property tax. Every time the university purchases a piece of land, it takes it off the tax rolls and becomes non-taxable because the university doesn't pay taxes. And so that's an issue. You know, we want to see the university have growth, but sometimes their growth, which is good for them, may not be so good for us in terms of financially speaking. So that's part of the balancing that we have to work through. Next slide, please. So this is my job in a nutshell. I'm charged with showing initiative. I'm being paid to make decisions, to provide leadership, to deal with our legislative process on getting the agenda ready for council meetings and things like that, fiscal oversight, developing a budget, and problem solving. We have all kinds of problems, and part of what I'm here for is to help us be innovative, be creative, be collaborative, and I'll say to be civil, because civility is very important if we're going to be an effective organization. And that's what the city administrator's task is. So those are the 6 things I'm here to do, and I'm happy to do it. Next slide, please. Here is how you can be engaged with learning about what your government is doing. This gives you all the website, Twitter handle, Facebook, LinkedIn, all the places that we are. Our council meetings are on the 1st and 3rd Mondays. We have, I think, over 60 boards and commissions, and they meet all over the place. We started in January under the authority or direction of state government. We have to meet in person now for council and boards and commissions. That's been fun, but we're doing the best we can. So with that, let me go to your Q&A. Let's see. Is the Ann Arbor government implementing laws, directives as to meeting the expectations of POC, working population, given the economic hardships in areas like renting, home ownership, education, justice with policing? It's become a lot more difficult since COVID-19, and the city leadership needs to address these and other issues during challenging times. So some of what you just heard me say is an example of how, or the things that we're trying to work on. Some of the issues in front of us are not necessarily things we will solve, but things that we need to address. From my perspective, we need to be a government that is certainly fiscally sound, but also demonstrates compassion. We have passed some legislation that deals with things like this early renting issue that's been going on. We would be in a stronger position if we owned land that we could use for a lot of things. We don't, so we have to work a little bit harder. We're trying to make our city be more inclusive with regards to good jobs. We are active. There's a lot of new businesses that have been developed through with the assistance of Spark, and that's why we support Spark. Policing is being reimagined across the United States. That is a work in progress. As I said at the top, my style is to talk straight to people, and people don't always agree with what I say. That's fine, that's democracy. We need both things. We need to be creative about what unarmed response looks like. We also need to be better at policing, because we're going to need both. There are some situations where you do need police and others where you don't. City leadership, on the one hand, needs to be stable to address some of these things, and that's what we're trying to work on right now. How long are these sessions for? I don't know. Sarah, when is this over?
They are technically over at 8:30, but whenever you're done is when we're done.
Okay, well, at 7:37, we're not going to be anywhere near 8:30 or even 8 o'clock. So those of you that are ready to go, hold on a few more minutes. You'll be able to run out and get your hamburger for the evening, or plant-based food if that's what you're into. You mentioned that when you started it in the city administrator role in Kentucky, you didn't feel like you were qualified. What would you now say are suitable qualifications for someone to be a city administrator? So when I look at it now, I didn't necessarily know if I was qualified when I started, because I didn't really understand what municipal management was all about. And one of the things that my friends helped me to understand is I already had the ability to manage money, to manage people, to manage technology, and to do problem solving, because that's what I did in the private sector. And since I have gotten into local government, I have now gotten to a level where I have what's called a credentialed manager status. So in the city management world, there are about 12,000 city managers worldwide. About 11 or 12% of our population has the credentialed status that I have. And so I go to school every year, just like an attorney has to go get continuing education or credits. I have to go to school 40 hours a year plus, studying how cities are run. And so for someone who wants to be a city administrator, it's not that you have to have a master's in public administration, although that helps, but you certainly have to learn or have the ability to deal with budgets that can be in the hundreds of millions of dollars. When I worked in Phoenix, our budget was $4 billion a year and nearly 15,000 people. So you've got to have leadership skills, administrative skills. You have to be able to communicate. You have to be able to work with elected officials. There's a lot that goes into being a city administrator, but there are more people coming along. The baby boom effect is hitting city management just like it's hitting everything else. Baby boomers are retiring out of city manager roles. So we're going to need to replenish that with a lot of new faces in the coming years. And there are courses and learnings that you can do to be a city administrator. It's not for everybody. I'll say this and I'll move on. One of the hardest aspects of being in this kind of job is the toll it takes on your family. So I'll break it down in an example that you would get. before Coach Harbaugh beat Ohio State this year, after a lot of years of not beating them, you can imagine what his family was hearing when they went places and they knew this is the coach's family. Well, it's the same with the city administrator or city manager. When I make decisions that people don't like, in many instances, they're not going to approach me and say it to my face. But as my kids were growing up and as my wife was a professional herself, they would get it. And when there was negative things in the media about decisions that I made, I've got thick skin. It didn't faze me, but it fazed them. And so if you want to be a city administrator, you got to make sure your family knows what that means and they're ready to go along for the ride. How is the University of Michigan's presence in Ann Arbor similar to or different from corporate headquarters in Cincinnati? It's really dramatically different, and it's more akin to what I've experienced working in Lexington, Kentucky, where the University of Kentucky is the dominant employer. It's the dominant presence. Kroger's, Macy's, and Procter and Gamble have worldwide reaches because they sell products every place. And one of the fundamental differences is when you have a headquarters in your city, we could periodically go to them and say, we need to do this kind of project or this kind of affordable housing initiative. And they might write a check for $1 million because they could. The University of Michigan is not going to give us money like that because they're not in a position to do that. They don't have the same kind of reach. They do have strong influence. One of the other fundamental differences is those corporate headquarters hire talent, influential talent from around the globe. And so they are able to bring a spotlight to the community. You know, it's not that distinguished researchers don't do that at the university, but it's a different kind of influence. It's a different kind of reach. Both are important. And from the city perspective, we do have to work well with both. But I would be extremely happy if we had both the university and headquarters located here, because then things would be much better. Further clarification about roles, the mayor and council. Is the mayor considered a member of council? And what is the relationship between the mayor and the city administrator? Technically speaking, the mayor is a member of council, but he is separately elected. The mayor is elected independently of people in the 5 wards. The relationship between the mayor and the city administrator. So on this floor where I am, if you go out of my office, you've got my assistant right next to me. The assistant city administrator is right next to her. The mayor's assistant in the mayor's office. So we're all right here together. Just by the nature of the job, the city administrator is probably going to communicate with the mayor more than the other elected officials. And part of the reason for that is just logistics and pragmatic. City council members in Ann Arbor do not have offices in City Hall. Only the mayor does. The mayor is here a lot more frequently than council members. Council members are usually only physically in the building when they're either coming for a committee or council meeting or coming here to see me or some of the other staff. So if something were to happen in the city where they all need to be notified, My style of doing things is to make sure that all 11 people are notified at the same time. We have ways of doing that. But as I said before, the mayor is the face of the city. So there are certain things that to the outside world, even though there is a city administrator, people want to hear from the mayor. They want to know, what does the mayor have to say about it? Either if something extraordinarily good happens, or if something very bad happens, they want the mayor to comment. The mayor is one of my bosses, but he's an equal part boss. So I work for all 11 people equally. I treat all of them even-handed. My job is to be apolitical, so I don't get into political issues between them. Because of the industry that I'm in, there's an organization called ICMA, or the International City County Management Association. And that entity governs city managers or city administrators the way the American Bar Association governs attorneys. And so in my industry, I am prohibited from doing things like I can't endorse political candidates. I cannot put yard signs up, bumper stickers. I can't be involved in any kind of partisan politics. And so that allows me to do my job and function with all of the elected officials evenly. So even if we had Republican elected officials, which in Ann Arbor we don't, but if we did, I would have to be able to work evenly with both party reps regardless. How is inflation impacting the budget? It's impacting it the way it is the rest of the country. Prices for construction are going up, prices for fuel. We have been impacted by the supply chain issues. So we're having to wait longer to get things that we order, just like everyone else. It means that it's more expensive for us to patch streets or replace water lines, which means we need to have more revenue. And I didn't go into the different ways I'm proposing that we go after revenue beyond going after our greater share of federal dollars. But we've got to expand our economic pie, in my opinion. So inflation is an issue just like everywhere else. Does Jennifer Hall report to me? No, she doesn't. She collaborates with me about housing developments that they're doing, but she has her own board, and that's who she reports to. She has to collaborate with me if, for example, she wants to build a development on city-owned land. They still have to work through city processes. We may help with financing of some of what she wants to do, but she's not considered part of my cabinet, if you will. When I hold my executive meetings on Mondays, she is not present. She works mostly through our service area administrator for community and economic development. That's Derek Delacourt. But she and I do communicate on a regular basis. What is your opinion as to what would make Ann Arbor a more livable city? That is, what do you think would make Ann Arbor a more delightful place to live? Much better streets and roads than what we currently have. A broadened sense of place, meaning we need more developed areas in some of our neighborhoods for commerce. And I don't mean, strip malls and a bunch of drive-throughs, but the economy functions well if you have a significant portion of small business development. And so the condition of the infrastructure, we have a problem in Ann Arbor with street lights and all of that. So a lot of infrastructure work to do. We have to make some decisions about reuse of the land that we have and make it be responsive to people that live here. So I'll just give you a big picture example. Over the last handful of years, the United States has started to rethink and reevaluate the importance of things like malls. So Briarwood Mall as an example, what does the next iteration of that space need to be? It's privately owned. What would it need to be attractive and value added to our residents? We have set very broad and aggressive sustainability goals. So we've got to make sure that our environment speaks to people who have support for all of those things. What do I mean? A healthy incorporation of multimodal transportation. So walking, biking, incorporated with where cars are, making sure transit is responsive. And more livable to me means more housing at all levels. That means more market rate, more workforce housing, more affordable housing. And it means jobs at all levels so people can be gainfully employed. Spark is, in simple terms, think of Spark as an economic development agency. It's not a part of city government, but it works on behalf of city government. A lot of cities actually have an economic development department as part of the city structure. In Ann Arbor, we don't. We have a relationship with Spark. So Spark is comprised of, it's got a board, which I sit on, that are business people. We've got staff that are paid as a result of companies providing money to Spark. And so they do things like create an incubator for small businesses to be developed, work with angel investors to invest in small business growth, help businesses that are already here to grow and expand, and in some instances, interact with the governor's office on trying to recruit businesses to this portion of Michigan. Milton, why did you come to Ann Arbor? What sold you on us? So you heard me explain the things that I've done in other cities and the kind of environments that I've been in. And I'm at a point of my career where, I'm not trying to chase jobs. I'm not trying to build a career. I've already done that. I want to be in an environment where I'm needed. I want to be in an environment where I'm valued. I want to be in a community where I think I can help. Ann Arbor has had a difficult 2 or 3 years. This community, I believe, needs a stable, seasoned professional. I am that. And I feel a little awkward with my next comments, but it helps provide context for you. I've been in municipal management for 37 years. In the city management world, I'm widely known. There really aren't city manager jobs that open here or even in Canada that I'm not approached about. So because of my longevity and knowledge of how to run a city, I want to put that to use. So I'm not looking for, a lot of fame, glory, or attention on myself. I'm at a stage of my life where I want to do something that's meaningful and really use what time I have left. This is my last job if it becomes permanent. When I stop here, my wife and I will be done. We'll figure out what the next chapter looks like. But when I read about what had transpired here and when I talked to the mayor and council and the search firm, it just seemed like it was a place I needed to be. And so I'm glad I'm here. The job is tough as hell on some days, but it's what I do. By defining the $600 million budget, are you referring to general fund monies exclusively? No. When I say 600 million, that's all funds. So that's general fund and capital. It's millages, it's the whole 9 yards of cities tend to focus on the general fund most because that's what pays for the basic services that we do day in and day out. But from a city administrator perspective, when I transmit a budget, it's the whole budget. And so that's where the 600 million in round numbers comes from. What areas of federal grants do you think Ann Arbor would be able to leverage? We certainly can go after infrastructure money. We need to replace a water treatment facility here. The price tag for a water treatment facility is in excess of $100 million. There are special pots within the infrastructure budget or infrastructure bill that the president and Congress passed that's earmarked for projects that cost more than 100 million. We have bridges here that needs to be replaced. There are sustainability related grants that we can go after at the federal government. Governor Whitmer has created a state office of infrastructure. We're trying to understand how that office is going to function. We also can go after grants for housing related things, affordable housing, and the real key development that attracts a lot of attention is mixed use development. So where it's not just housing, but housing that has some retail to it, it may have some office. And so when you're trying to do key projects, one of the things that you do is assemble what we refer to as the capital stack. And so that means we're trying to bring financing or financial resources from different places. So it may be some general fund, but not much. It may be federal grants, it may be state grants. There are foundations, for example, that have been funding certain aspects of police reform. So if we're doing things like unarmed response or other types of reform, we might be able to go after foundation money to help with that. There's grants that can help with training, that can help with our purchase of electric equipment or electric vehicles. And one of the other things that we're doing that I didn't mention, I'm asking the city council to embrace bringing contract people on board who are contract grant writers. So they wouldn't be full-time employees, but they would help us go after some of the money that's available that we don't go after today because we don't have the capacity to do it. Thank you for being candid and telling us about some of the differences in the way our government is run compared to other places. I think it's important to know this so that we can see what might be possible. And I think you have an awful lot to offer the future of our city. Thanks for taking the interim role, and I hope you're enjoying being here. I am, other than the winter. Did I say that? Because I still have my house in Phoenix. And when I was in Phoenix a few weeks ago, it was 75 degrees. It's 2 degrees in Ann Arbor and 75 in Phoenix. And I'm wondering, why in the hell am I in Ann Arbor? And then I got on a plane and I came back anyway. Let's see, I talked about inflation a little bit. Does the city fund Spark or the Housing Commission? We do provide money for the Housing Commission in different ways. We do provide some funding to Spark for some of the things that we need them to do. And that is the last of the questions in queue. It is 8:02. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your attention with me. As you can see, I'm back in the dark, but there's no point in me turning the lights back on, because when I leave you, I'm going home and figure out what dinner looks like tonight. And looks like there was a late question added. Oh, it's just thanking me for being here. I appreciate your attention. You're going to hear from some other professionals in the coming weeks that work here. These are very dedicated individuals who have given their life to service, just like I have. And I think when you hear all of us together, then that will give you a very good understanding of your local government and how we're trying to serve you and what our challenges are. I encourage you to take care of yourself, stay safe, please stay engaged. If you want to send me an email or have questions you think of after the fact, I'm sure you can find me and I'll be glad to get back to you. So Sarah, take us home.
Thank you so much, Milton. I really appreciate it. And I know that all of our attendees really appreciate you being here tonight with us. And what a great way to kick off the 2022 year for Community Academy. And I'm really excited for all of you to meet everyone else that we get to work with every day. So thank you so much, Milton. And thank you, everybody. We'll see you next week.
All right. Good night, everybody.